April 8, 1943. 27,000 feet above Caen, France. The oxygen mask could not conceal Oberleutnant Ralph Hermakin's sardonic grin as he observed the ungainly shapes laboriously ascending toward his formation through the utterly transparent dome of his FW-190A5. The seasoned ace from Jagdgeschwader 26, age 26, meticulously studied the American fighters making their baptism of fire over occupied Europe. "Our armies have dispatched us flying milk bottles," he transmitted to his wingman, incapable of suppressing his amusement at the sight of the colossal Republic P-47 Thunderbolts struggling to gain altitude. Below them, 16 P-47C Thunderbolts of the 4th Fighter Group lumbered upward in a tight formation, their 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engines straining against their 7-ton mass. To German pilots accustomed to the elegant Spitfires and agile Soviet fighters, these corpulent American machines appeared almost absurd. Barrel-shaped fuselages topped with greenhouse cockpits, wings that seemed disproportionately small for their massive bodies, propellers that dwarfed anything in the Luftwaffe's arsenal. What Hermakin failed to comprehend, what none of the German pilots circling like predators above could have possibly envisioned, was that they were witnessing the advent of the instrument that would systematically dismantle the Luftwaffe's fighter contingent. Within 18 months, these flying milk bottles would transmute from objects of scorn into harbingers of dread, their 8.50 caliber Browning machine guns becoming the most terrifying sound in German skies. The mathematics of obliteration were already primed within those broad wings. 3,400 rounds of ammunition, a combined firing rate of 6,000 rounds per minute, an abundance of concentrated firepower capable of cleaving a Messerschmitt in two in less than 2 seconds. The metamorphosis commenced that April morning when Major Donald Blakesley, commanding the 335th Fighter Squadron, detected the German formation maneuvering for an assault. The former Eagle Squadron veteran, who had transitioned from RAF Spitfires mere weeks prior, grasped what his subordinates had yet to realize: that survival in the P-47 demanded an abandonment of all established tenets of aerial combat. The Thunderbolt represented a profound departure from conventional fighter design paradigms. While the Germans had pursued lightweight interceptors optimized for climb and turn performance, Republic Aviation had engineered something unprecedented: a high-altitude juggernaut that leveraged mass, power, and ordnance to redefine the very principles of aerial warfare. Among the 56 American pilots dispersed across the French sky that morning were individuals destined for legendary status, future aces whose appellations would instill terror in Luftwaffe hearts. Yet on April 8, 1943, they were novices in an unproven platform, confronting the most experienced fighter force globally. The Germans had engaged in continuous combat since 1939, boasting veterans of Poland, France, Britain, and Russia. The Americans, conversely, had accrued precisely 0 combat days. This is the narrative of how industrial logic triumphed over tactical ingenuity, how sheer quantity and superior quality coalesced into overwhelming supremacy, and how German pilots' amusement transformed into sheer terror as they discovered the devastating effect synchronized Browning machine guns could inflict upon an aircraft at 400 yards. The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt emerged from the crucible of a June 1940 panic. As German fighters swept across France, Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's Georgian-born chief designer, received urgent specifications from the U.S. Army Air Corps. They sought a high-altitude interceptor capable of matching the Luftwaffe's finest. What Kartveli designed, however, was a colossus that redefined the boundaries of possibility. "It will be a dinosaur," Kartveli admitted to his design team, "but it will be a dinosaur with proper proportions." The XP-47B prototype, which first took to the skies on May 6, 1941, astounded all who beheld it. Weighing 9,900 pounds empty, it was 65% heavier than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer. The gargantuan turbo-supercharger system, with its intricate ducting coursing through the aft fuselage, imparted an almost gravid appearance. Test pilots approaching it for the initial time invariably posed the identical query: does this thing actually fly? Not only did it fly, but it flew with a performance unmatched at altitude. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double WASP engine, an 18-cylinder radio producing 2,000 horsepower, could sustain full power at 27,000 feet, where German fighters struggled for breath. The turbo supercharger, energized by exhaust gases, delivered sea-level performance in the stratosphere, where the atmosphere was too attenuated for conventional superchargers. Major Hubert Zemke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group undergoing training at Bridgeport, Connecticut, initially harbored a disdain for the aircraft. His unit experienced the loss of 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in training mishaps between September 1942 and January 1943. The P-47 claimed more American lives during training than the Germans would in the initial months of combat. It would ground loop on landing, torque roll on takeoff, and dive with such ferocity that pilots encountered compressibility, their controls becoming frozen as shock waves formed on the wings. However, those who mastered it discovered something extraordinary. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma who would ascend to become one of America's preeminent aces with 27 victories, recounted his maiden flight. It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it, you aimed it. The initial combat engagements in April and May 1943 substantiated every German preconception. The P-47s could not outturn the FW-190s, could not outclimb the Bf-110s, and could not match their agile handling at medium altitudes. Luftwaffe pilots rapidly devised strategies to exploit these deficiencies, attacking from below where the heavy Thunderbolts faltered, and forcing turning engagements where agility superseded firepower. Hauptmann Joseph Priller, commanding officer of Jagdgeschwader 26, reported to headquarters after his inaugural encounter. The new American fighter is fodder for the slaughter. It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow. Our lads are calling them Indians, fat targets masquerading as warriors. The statistics appeared to validate German confidence. In their inaugural month of operations, the American fighter groups lost 14 Thunderbolts for a mere 3 confirmed German kills. The RAF, observing from their Spitfire squadrons, subtly advised the Americans to reconsider their choice of mount. British pilots jested that the most effective evasive maneuver in a P-47 was to unstrap and sprint around the spacious cockpit. Yet something peculiar was transpiring during those early encounters that German intelligence conspicuously overlooked. The P-47s that were shot down had absorbed incredible punishment before succumbing. One aircraft returned from a May 4th mission bearing 21 cannon impacts and over 100 machine gun strikes, damage that would have annihilated a Messerschmitt or Spitfire. The massive radio engine, devoid of vulnerable coolant systems, shrugged off hits that would have incapacitated a liquid-cooled fighter. More critically, when P-47s managed to bring their guns to bear, the outcomes were catastrophic. The Thunderbolt's armament array generated a zone of destruction that German pilots had never before experienced. Unlike the rifle-caliber weaponry of early war fighters or cannons with limited ammunition reserves, the American fighter could sustain continuous fire for upwards of 30 seconds, an eternity in aerial combat. The pivotal event that began to shift German perceptions occurred on June 26, 1943, over Lyon, France. It involved Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron and an encounter that would achieve legendary status on both sides of the conflict. Johnson's formation of 48 P-47s was returning from escort duty when they were ambushed by 16 FW-190s from 2/Jagdgeschwader 26, led by Hauptmann Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, younger brother of the renowned Adolf Galland. The Germans executed a flawless attack, diving from the sun with a decisive speed advantage. Johnson's Thunderbolt, positioned at the rear of the formation, was caught in the crossfire of multiple assailants, sustaining catastrophic damage within the initial seconds of combat. 21 20mm cannon shells detonated across his aircraft. The canopy shattered, hydraulic fluid sprayed into the cockpit, the engine cowling was ripped away, and fire erupted behind the instrument panel. Johnson, wounded in the nose and leg by shrapnel and bullet fragments, attempted to bail out, only to discover the canopy was jammed. A 20mm shell had exploded in the canopy track, fusing it shut. He was trapped in a dying aircraft at 27,000 feet. What transpired next defied every tenet of combat damage tolerance. Despite possessing no forward visibility through the oil-smeared windscreen, a barely functioning engine that shuddered violently, and controls that responded only intermittently, Johnson managed to level the aircraft and orient it toward England. The P-47 continued its flight, bearing damage that would have reduced any other fighter to falling wreckage. Then, the situation escalated. A solitary FW-190, piloted by an unidentified individual from 2/JG-26, discovered the crippled Thunderbolt limping towards the channel at under 170 miles per hour. Historical research has never definitively identified this pilot, although several names have been proposed based on German combat reports from that day. What followed was one of the most extraordinary encounters in the annals of aerial warfare. The German pilot positioned himself behind Johnson's P-47 and opened fire with his 4 20mm cannons and 2 13mm machine guns. Johnson, incapable of evasion, could only huddle behind his armor plating and pray. The Thunderbolt absorbed the entirety of the cannon ammunition. The German then repositioned and fired again, this time employing only his machine guns. With his cannon ammunition expended, the German pilot pulled alongside, staring in utter disbelief at the flying wreck. Johnson could clearly discern his face, young, fair-haired, his expression transitioning from confidence to bewilderment to something akin to apprehension. The German repositioned and unleashed his remaining machine gun ammunition into the Thunderbolt. Yet it persisted in flight. He pulled alongside once more, shook his head in apparent amazement, offered an informal salute, and peeled away, presumably out of ammunition. Johnson's P-47 landed at Manston with its engines sputtering on the runway. The crew chief ceased counting bullet holes after reaching 200. One cannon shell had detonated mere inches from Johnson's head. Another had detonated against the armor plate behind his seat. The engine had sustained direct hits. The control cables were partially severed. 3 of the 4 main longerons, the structural backbone of the fuselage, were shot through. Nevertheless, the aircraft had delivered him home. The survival of Johnson's aircraft sent seismic waves through both air forces. American engineers examining the wreckage realized they had profoundly underestimated their own creation. German intelligence, upon receiving combat reports from the second flight of Jagdgeschwader 26, initially refused to credit them. No aircraft, they reasoned, could absorb such a magnitude of punishment, but testimony from multiple pilots corroborated the impossible. The Thunderbolt had endured everything the Luftwaffe's premier fighter could inflict, and survived. By July 1943, American pilots were beginning to exploit the P-47's true capabilities. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke, the 56th Fighter Group commander, had uncovered the secret through arduous trial and error. Do not turn with them. Do not climb with them at low altitude. Utilize your mass, employ your power, unleash your guns. The Thunderbolt's immense weight, initially perceived as a liability, transformed into a formidable weapon. In a dive, nothing could match its velocity. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could attain 550 miles per hour, exceeding the speed of any German fighter, even in a vertical descent. This velocity could be converted into altitude during a zoom climb, leaving pursuing fighters helplessly behind. Captain Walker Mahurin, who would become one of the initial American aces in Europe, developed what became known as the boom and zoom tactic, though pilots colloquially referred to it as the Thunderbolt turkey shoot. Rather than engaging in traditional dogfights, P-47 formations would ascend to 30,000 feet, higher than German fighters could operate effectively. When Luftwaffe fighters appeared below, the Thunderbolts would roll inverted and dive, achieving speeds that rendered deflection firing impossible for the defending Germans. At the nadir of these dives, the American heavy machine guns would unleash their fury. German pilots who survived described it as confronting a veritable wall of lead. The combined firepower created an impenetrable zone of devastation. Aircraft caught within this convergence pattern did not simply fall, they disintegrated. The true revelation of American firepower manifested during the August 17, 1943, dual raid on Schweinfurt and Regensburg, the deepest penetration into Germany attempted to that date. This mission would illustrate both the P-47's limitations, particularly its range even with drop tanks, and its terrifying efficacy when deployed optimally. Major David Schilling, leading the 62nd Fighter Squadron, encountered a formation of Messerschmitt 110 destroyer aircraft, preparing to engage B-17 bombers with their formidable cannon and rocket armament. These twin-engine German fighters, heavily armed but less agile, served as the Luftwaffe's specialized bomber killers. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts rolled into their attack dive from 28,000 feet. Unteroffizier Hinrich Roth, a gunner in one of the Me-110s who survived, later recounted during a P interrogation. The American fighters descended like hammers from heaven. I opened fire at 800 meters. Hits registered. I observed them striking the fighter's wing. The P-47 didn't even falter. Then he fired. The aircraft ahead of us simply disintegrated. Not shot down, destroyed. Wings detached from the fuselage, tail severed, the crew compartment shredded into metallic confetti. In 2 seconds, a 110 ceased to exist. 8 Messerschmitt 110s were destroyed in less than a minute. The German pilots had never before witnessed such concentrated firepower. Each P-47 carried 425 rounds per gun, totaling 3,400 rounds, with a combined weight of nearly 900 pounds. At convergence distance, typically established at 300 yards, all 8 guns' ballistic paths intersected within a zone approximately 6 feet in diameter. Anything within that zone was subjected to 100 projectiles per second, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The ammunition itself was a testament to American industrial might. While German fighters grappled with limited cannon ammunition, typically between 120 and 200 rounds for a 20-millimeter weapon, American pilots could sustain fire for over half a minute. The standard combat load comprised a mix of armor-piercing incendiary tracer, and standard ball ammunition, configured in patterns designed for both destruction and ignition. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, who would achieve the distinction of top American ace in Europe with 28 victories, described the effect. When you hit them with all 8, they don't just go down, they explode. I witnessed a 109 literally cut in half, the tail drifting one way, the nose and wings another. The pilot never knew what struck him. By September 1943, the Luftwaffe was confronting another grim reality concerning the P-47. Its performance demonstrably improved with altitude, while German fighters faltered. The turbo-supercharged double Wasp engine maintained its rated power output up to 30,000 feet. German fighters, reliant on single-stage or two-stage mechanical superchargers, experienced a significant degradation in performance above 25,000 feet. Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most successful aces with 206 victories, met his end under these circumstances on October 8, 1943. Leading Jagdgeschwader 1 against a B-17 formation at 28,000 feet over Bremen, Philipp found his FW-190A6 sluggish and unresponsive in the rarefied air. The BMW 801 engine, powerful at medium altitudes, was gasping for oxygen nearly 6 miles above the Earth. When P-47s of the 56th Fighter Group dove upon his formation from 32,000 feet, the German fighters were rendered defenseless. Robert Johnson, now an experienced combat pilot on his trajectory to ace status, was flying at 31,000 feet when he spotted Philipp's distinctive FW-190 with its elaborate nose art. Johnson's combat report was concise. Open fire at 300 yards, 30-degree deflection. Observed hits along the entire fuselage. Enemy aircraft exploded. No parachute observed. Philipp's demise sent shockwaves through the Luftwaffe. If one of their finest, a man who had survived over 500 combat missions on both eastern and western fronts, could not prevail against the Thunderbolts, what prospects did average pilots possess? The German High Command ordered an immediate investigation into the P-47's capabilities. The report presented to Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring in November 1943 was sobering. The Thunderbolt's service ceiling exceeded 42,000 feet, higher than any German fighter could attain. Its dive speed approached the sound barrier. Its armor protection included a 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot, a half-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armored deflection plates surrounding the engine. Most alarmingly, its robust construction permitted it to absorb damage that would obliterate 3 conventional fighters and still return to base. In January 1944, a new variant of the P-47 began arriving in England, one that would finalize its metamorphosis from a laughingstock to a nightmare. The P-47D-22 featured a Hamilton standard hydromatic propeller with paddle blades 13 feet in diameter, possessing broad chord blades that bit into the air like colossal scoops. The improvement in climb rate was immediate and dramatic. Where earlier Thunderbolts had ascended at a modest 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, the paddle blade variants could achieve 3,000 feet per minute, matching or exceeding German fighters at most altitudes. The massive propeller also enhanced acceleration, enabling P-47s to build energy more rapidly in level flight. Hauptmann Hans Nock of Jagdgeschwader 11, a veteran with over 200 combat missions, encountered the new variants in February 1944 during a bomber interception near Hanover. He documented in his combat diary, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We ambushed a formation near Hanover, anticipating our customary advantage. They turned into us and climbed alongside. When we attempted to disengage, they pursued us upwards to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was intercepted and blown to pieces. Nothing remained but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we mocked last year. The paddle blade propeller did more than enhance performance. It altered the very sound of the Thunderbolt. The distinctive thundering roar generated by the blade tips reaching supersonic speeds could be heard from miles away. German ground troops reported being able to identify approaching P-47s by their sound alone, a deep, menacing rumble that signaled impending doom from above. They began to call it Donnerschlag, thunderclap. By March 1944, P-47s equipped with external fuel tanks could escort bombers deep into Germany. The standard configuration carried either two 108-gallon wing tanks or a 75-gallon belly tank, extending their operational range to over 1,000 miles. With the paddle blade propeller providing enhanced performance even when laden, Thunderbolts could engage on equitable terms immediately after jettisoning their tanks. The Luftwaffe's response was to concentrate its efforts on the bombers, hoping to inflict sufficient losses to halt the American daylight offensive. However, this necessitated penetrating the P-47 escort screen, an increasingly suicidal endeavor. German pilots developed a grudging respect, bordering on fear, for the large American fighters. Major Erich Hartmann, one of Germany's top aces with 275 victories, predominantly on the Eastern Front, survived an encounter with P-47s on March 6, 1944, which left him severely wounded. He later recalled in a post-war interview, "We saw them above us, their corpulent silhouettes against the sun." Someone laughed and remarked, "Here come the flying pigs." Nobody was laughing 30 seconds later. They descended like an avalanche, faster than we could react. The initial pass obliterated 3 of our fighters, vanishing instantly, transformed into burning debris. Their guns did not fire in bursts like ours. They unleashed solid streams of fire. Being caught in that torrent meant certain demise. The escort duties brought another advantage of the P-47 to light, its impressive endurance. While German fighter aircraft had to operate at maximum power, rapidly depleting their fuel, the robust American radial engines allowed for efficient cruising at high altitudes. Thunderbolts could loiter with bomber formations for extended periods, providing alternating top cover while retaining enough fuel for both combat engagement and the journey home. As an increasing number of P-51 Mustangs arrived in the spring of 1944 to assume long-range escort responsibilities, P-47 units shifted their focus towards ground attack operations, a specialization that would eventually make them the most dreaded aerial adversaries in the German arsenal. This transition gained momentum in earnest during April of 1944 as the Allied forces finalized their preparations for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's formidable battery of heavy machine guns proved equally devastating against terrestrial targets. Standard armor-piercing incendiary ammunition possessed the capability to pierce the upper armor of most German military vehicles, while the sheer volume of sustained fire could obliterate less protected targets in mere seconds. A mere 2-second burst unleashed 160 half-inch projectiles into an area roughly the size of a truck. However, it was the integration of bombs and rockets that truly transformed the P-47 into a versatile and formidable war machine. The D-25 model was capable of carrying 2 1,000-pound bombs beneath its wings and a 500-pound bomb affixed to its fuselage, a bomb load comparable to that of early war medium bombers. Later iterations incorporated zero-length rocket pylons for 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, or HVRs, each possessing the destructive power equivalent to a 105mm artillery shell. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, experienced the ferocity of P-47 ground assaults firsthand. "They descended so low," he recounted, "that you could clearly see the pilots' faces. The cacophony was terrifying. Engines roaring, rockets shrieking. Then came the hammer blows of those heavy machine guns. An entire column of our trucks simply vanished. 20 vehicles were reduced to burning wreckage in a single pass." The psychological impact on the men was devastating. They christened them Jabos, fighter bombers. But these were something more. They were like flying artillery, possessing the precision of snipers. On the 6th of June, 1944, the Luftwaffe learned the full extent of the power imbalance that had shifted. Over 500 P-47s provided an impenetrable aerial shield above the invasion beaches. German fighters attempting to reach the landing zones were systematically annihilated. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of Jagdgeschwader II, one of only 3 German pilots to breach the defenses that day, reported, "The sky belonged to the Americans. Thunderbolts were stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet. We attempted a breakthrough at dawn with 12 fighters from our group. I was the sole survivor. The P-47s were present at every altitude. You couldn't climb above them, nor could you dive beneath them. Their guns turned our fighters into falling aluminum." In the weeks following D-Day, P-47s relentlessly disrupted German logistical movements during daylight hours. The statistical impact was staggering. In June alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts were credited with destroying 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks and armored vehicles, and 4,553 horse-drawn vehicles. The Wehrmacht was compelled to restrict its movements to nighttime, severely hindering its ability to react to Allied advancements. The Germans deployed every conceivable measure to counter the Thunderbolt menace. They reinforced vehicle armor, deployed additional anti-aircraft batteries, and developed novel camouflage techniques. None of it proved effective. The P-47's formidable combination of speed, resilience, and overwhelming firepower rendered it virtually unstoppable. Even the feared 88mm anti-aircraft guns struggled to maintain accurate tracking on the rapidly maneuvering fighters at low altitudes. While wreaking havoc across Europe, the P-47 was simultaneously proving its mettle in the Pacific theater. The 348th Fighter Group, operating from New Guinea, discovered that the Thunderbolt's inherent characteristics were ideally suited to the immense distances and unforgiving conditions of the Pacific War. Colonel Neil Kirby, commanding the 348th, devised tactical approaches specifically tailored for the Pacific environment. On the 11th of October 1943, Kirby led 4 P-47s in an engagement against 40 Japanese aircraft over Wewak, personally downing 6 enemy planes during a single mission, an achievement for which he was awarded the Medal of Honor. The Japanese, accustomed to engaging agile but comparatively fragile American fighters, were ill-prepared for the P-47's potent combination of destructive force and remarkable durability. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, who encountered P-47s over New Guinea, later penned, "We called them monsters. Our 20mm cannons, which could obliterate a P-40 with a few hits, seemed to have no effect. I unleashed dozens of rounds into one Thunderbolt and watched it fly away." Their return fire was terrifying, streams of heavy projectiles that tore aircraft asunder. The P-47N, developed specifically for the Pacific theater, featured augmented fuel capacity with wet wings capable of holding 93 gallons each, extending its operational range to 2,350 miles. This variant would later escort B-29 bombers on missions to Japan, demonstrating that the short-ranged fighter of 1943 had evolved into a true long-range weapon. Perhaps the ultimate validation of the P-47's evolution came in its confrontations with German jet fighters. The Messerschmitt Me-262, with its top speed of 540 miles per hour, should have been beyond the reach of propeller-driven aircraft. However, Thunderbolt pilots discovered that they could intercept the jets under 2 specific circumstances: during takeoff and landing, when the jets were most vulnerable, and during high-speed dives from altitude. On the 27th of November, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel John C. Meare of the 352nd Fighter Group became one of the initial pilots to successfully engage and destroy an Me-262 with a P-47. Diving from 28,000 feet, Meare's Thunderbolt attained speeds approaching 500 miles per hour, sufficient velocity to intercept the jet in level flight. The jet pilot, confident in his speed advantage, remained oblivious to the descending P-47 until Mir's guns unleashed their fury at 400 yards. Mir's combat report noted, "The enemy aircraft disintegrated under fire. Large sections, including both engines, separated from the fuselage. The pilot did not survive. The concentrated fire from 8.50 caliber guns proved more effective than we had anticipated against jet aircraft." By early 1945, specialized P-47M variants were deployed specifically to counter German jets and V-1 flying bombs. With water methanol injection boosting their power output to 2,800 horsepower and refined aerodynamics, these ultimate Thunderbolts could achieve speeds of 470 miles per hour in level flight at 30,000 feet, fast enough to intercept even jets under specific conditions. Major George Bostwick, commanding the 63rd Fighter Squadron, which was equipped with P-47s, successfully shot down two Me-262s in March of 1945. His tactical report emphasized firepower over sheer speed. "The jets are faster," he stated, "but they lack maneuverability and cannot withstand significant damage. One well-aimed burst from our armament, and they fall apart as if constructed from paper. They are forced to reduce speed to engage bombers, and that is when we strike." The ultimate testament to American industrial might was displayed during Operation Bodenplatte. This represented the Luftwaffe's desperate endeavor to cripple Allied air power on the 1st of January, 1945. Nearly 900 German fighters, including their most experienced pilots, launched surprise assaults on Allied airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands. At Y-34 Airfield near Metzingen, the home base of the 365th Fighter Group's P-47s, the attack initially achieved success. German fighters destroyed 22 Thunderbolts on the ground, along with several other aircraft. A captured German pilot, brought before the command post, gestured at the burning aircraft and taunted, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brooking's retort became legendary throughout the 9th Air Force. He indicated the flight line, where ground crews were already clearing damaged aircraft and preparing hard stands for replacements. "By tomorrow," he declared, "we will have 40 new aircraft. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The German pilot's smug expression vanished. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47D-40S filled the flight line, having been ferried from depots in England. The Luftwaffe suffered the loss of 271 aircraft and 213 pilots during Bodenplatte, including many irreplaceable instructors and squadron leaders. These were losses they could never recover from. The Americans lost a total of 134 aircraft across all attacked airfields, with all replacements arriving within a week. The statistics painted a clear picture of inevitable defeat. Republic Aviation manufactured 15,683 P-47s during the war, a greater quantity than any other American fighter. At the peak of production, the Farmingdale factory on Long Island completed one Thunderbolt every hour, operating around the clock. The Evansville plant in Indiana, constructed on undeveloped farmland in 1942, was producing 500 aircraft per month by 1944. Each P-47D required 65,000 individual components, 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. The engine alone comprised 2,400 individual parts, machined to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Despite this complexity, American workers, many of them women who had never previously encountered an aircraft before the attack on Pearl Harbor, assembled these intricate machines with a precision that surpassed pre-war standards. The production of ammunition was equally prodigious. Each P-47 sortie demanded 3,400 rounds of .50 caliber ammunition, with hundreds of Thunderbolts undertaking daily missions. Ammunition expenditure surpassed 10 million rounds per month by mid-1944. The Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, one of several ammunition manufacturing facilities, produced 30 million rounds monthly. Each cartridge was manufactured to tolerances measured in 10,000ths of an inch, ensuring reliable feeding through the synchronized gun mechanisms. Fuel consumption was immense. Each Thunderbolt consumed 100 gallons per hour in normal flight, escalating to as much as 300 gallons in combat when water injection was engaged. The 9th Air Force alone consumed over 25 million gallons of aviation fuel monthly by late 1944, all of it transported across the Atlantic in tankers that were themselves products of American mass production capabilities. Even more remarkable than aircraft production was the scale of pilot training. By 1944, the United States was graduating 30,000 pilots annually from advanced training programs, a figure exceeding the total number of pilots trained by Germany throughout the entire war. Each P-47 pilot received a minimum of 400 hours of flight instruction before entering combat, including 100 hours specifically in advanced fighters. In contrast, German pilots were entering combat with less than 100 total flight hours by the war's conclusion. This disparity in training quality was evident in combat engagements. American pilots arrived in Europe proficient in formation flying, instrument navigation, gunnery, and tactical maneuvers. They had practiced against captured German aircraft, gaining a comprehensive understanding of their adversaries' capabilities and limitations. They possessed an intimate knowledge of their aircraft systems, having studied technical manuals that German pilots never received. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, who arrived in England in September 1944, exemplified the advantage conferred by American training. "I had 420 hours in my logbook," he stated, including 75 hours in the P-47. "I had fired at towed targets, practiced deflection shooting, and studied gun camera footage from actual combat. On my first mission, I knew precisely what to do. The German pilot I faced could not have had half my experience. It wasn't even a fair fight." In March of 1945, Oberstleutnant Joseph Priller, the same pilot who had derisively referred to the P-47s as pregnant cows 2 years prior, was interviewed by German propaganda officials seeking to bolster morale. His assessment, deemed too demoralizing for publication, revealed the complete reversal of German attitudes. "The Thunderbolt is the finest fighter bomber ever constructed," he reported. "Its firepower is unprecedented. The weapons never jam, never overheat, and never run out of ammunition in normal combat. It carries bombs like a medium bomber, fires rockets like artillery, and engages like a fighter when necessary. But beyond the machine itself lies what it represents: unlimited American production. They lose 10, they build 20. We lose 1, and it is gone forever." Their pilots arrive better trained than our instructors. They have ample fuel for training, ammunition for practice, spare parts for everything. We have nothing but courage, and courage without resources is merely delayed defeat. We laughed at them in 1943. We are not laughing now. When you hear those guns, you know death has come calling. The sound haunts us. Mechanical, precise, unstoppable. Like everything American, it is about overwhelming material superiority. They did not defeat us through superior tactics or braver pilots. They buried us under an avalanche of steel and lead. By April of 1945, the Luftwaffe existed largely as a theoretical entity. Fuel shortages grounded most of its aircraft. Experienced pilots were either dead or captured. Airfields lay in ruins, pockmarked by craters. Even with aircraft and fuel, German pilots faced an insurmountable challenge. Any offensive action meant confronting P-47 formations that dominated every altitude from ground level to 40,000 feet. Feldwebel Klaus Brettschneider, one of the last German pilots to receive training in 1945, flew precisely one combat mission before the war's end. His encounter with P-47s over Leipzig lasted 12 seconds. I saw them descending from above, he recounted, 4 Thunderbolts in perfect formation. I attempted to turn, but they were too fast. The lead aircraft fired from 500 meters. My aircraft shuddered as if struck by sledgehammers. The engine exploded, the wings separated. I barely managed to escape. While descending in my parachute, I watched them obliterate my entire staff. 6 fighters gone in under a minute. The sky rained burning aluminum and bodies. The psychological impact was absolute. German pilots developed what medical officers termed Jabo fever, a condition characterized by physical symptoms of stress that manifested when Thunderbolts were reported in the vicinity. Veterans who had faced Spitfires and Hurricanes without fear experienced debilitating anxiety before missions involving P-47s. The distinctive rumble of approaching Thunderbolts instilled panic among ground troops, who understood that immediate survival depended on finding cover. The final operational statistics for the P-47 are almost incomprehensible. In Europe, 3,752 German aircraft were destroyed in aerial combat, with an additional 3,315 aircraft destroyed on the ground. 9,000 locomotives were obliterated, along with 6,000 armored fighting vehicles and 68,000 trucks. 60,000 horse-drawn vehicles also met destruction. In the Pacific, 697 Japanese aircraft were downed in air-to-air engagements, and 150 were destroyed on the ground. 1,500 vehicles were eliminated, along with 150 locomotives, and countless barges, ships, and installations. The 9th Air Force alone, predominantly equipped with P-47s, executed 213,873 combat sorties, dropping 120,000 tons of ordnance, expending 135 million rounds of ammunition, and launching 60,000 rockets. Thunderbolt units achieved a remarkable kill-to-loss ratio of 4.6 to 1 in aerial combat, while simultaneously maintaining the lowest attrition rate of any Allied fighter bomber. Underlying these figures lies the profound human cost. The Luftwaffe sustained approximately 28,000 pilot fatalities in combat against Western Allied forces, many of whom fell victim to the concentrated fire of American heavy machine guns. Each loss represented years of specialized training that Germany could never replace. By the war's conclusion, the average German fighter pilot possessed less than 30 hours of combat experience, whereas the average P-47 pilot had accrued over 200 hours. At the Luftwaffe's interrogation center in Oberursel, captured Allied pilots were debriefed by German intelligence. Records recovered in 1945 revealed German assessments of Allied aircraft. The file compiled on the P-47, updated continuously throughout the war, documented a complete reversal of initial opinions. April 1943, large, unmaneuverable fighter, inferior to German types in all performance parameters except dive speed, machine gun armament insufficient against cannon-armed fighters, assessment, minimal threat. December 1943, exceptional high-altitude performance, extreme structural strength, firepower increasingly problematic, pilots exhibiting improved tactics, assessment, significant threat above 25,000 feet. June 1944, dominant fighter bomber, superior to all German types above 20,000 feet, firepower devastating against all target types. Structural strength makes shoot-down extremely difficult. Assessment, critical threat at all altitudes. March 1945, best fighter bomber of the war, combination of firepower, durability, and performance unmatched. Pilot quality exceptional. Assessment, unserviceable in direct engagement. In 1985, at a reunion of German and American fighter pilots held in Phoenix, Arizona, former adversaries met in peace. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, former head of the Luftwaffe fighter arm, was questioned about the P-47. His response, recorded on video, captured the complete transformation in perspective. "We made a terrible mistake in 1943, he stated. "We saw this big, heavy fighter and we laughed. We thought the Americans didn't understand air combat. We said they had built a bomber and called it a fighter. We were the ones who didn't understand. The Americans didn't try to build a European fighter. They built an American one, designed around production, firepower, and survivability. They understood that in a war of attrition, the aircraft that could withstand punishment and deliver devastating firepower would prevail." They were correct. The first time I flew a captured P-47 after the war, I understood everything. The power was incredible. It climbed as if it were falling upward. The cockpit was comfortable. The visibility excellent. The controls precise. It was a pilot's aircraft encased in armor. But what truly impressed me was realizing that America built over 15,000 of these complex machines while fighting a two-ocean war. Each one required an engine more complex than anything Germany produced. Yet they built them faster than we could construct simple fighters. That's when I knew we never had a chance. Those guns, we called them Roosevelt's piano because of the sound they made. Once you heard that sound, you never forgot it. Many of my friends heard it for the last time. The P-47 didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe, it annihilated it. The P-47's design perfectly embodied the American industrial philosophy, brute force engineering backed by unlimited resources. Every component was overbuilt, overpowered, and over-engineered. The wing spars could support 40,000 pounds, 3 times the aircraft's loaded weight. The engine mount could withstand 12 G-forces. The control cables were doubled throughout, incorporating automatic backup systems. The ammunition feed system alone was a marvel of engineering. 8 separate ammunition boxes, each holding 425 rounds, were fed through electric boost motors to prevent jamming during evasive maneuvers. The guns were electrically heated to prevent freezing at altitude. Each gun possessed its own charging mechanism and could be individually synchronized. The convergence point was adjustable from 150 to 400 yards, allowing pilots to optimize for their preferred engagement range. Even after the war, some German veterans maintained that the P-47 triumphed through sheer numbers rather than quality, asserting that German fighters were technically superior but overwhelmed by the opposition's quantity. However, combat records tell a different story. In engagements where the number of aircraft was equal, P-47s consistently prevailed. The heavy machine gun armament, initially dismissed as inferior to cannon, proved more effective in actual combat. Analysis of gun camera footage revealed why cannon shells, while individually more destructive, required precise aiming and had limited ammunition, typically 120 to 200 rounds in total. The P-47's weapons created a probability cloud of bullets that guaranteed hits, even with imperfect aim. At typical engagement ranges, a 2-second burst delivered at least 20 rounds into a fighter-sized target, sufficient to ensure its destruction. The ammunition itself was superior. American .50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary rounds employed a delayed-action fuse that ensured penetration before detonation. The incendiary compound burned at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to ignite aluminum structures. German 20mm shells, while heavier, frequently detonated on surface contact, causing spectacular but sometimes superficial damage. The P-47 Thunderbolt remains the heaviest single-engine piston fighter ever mass-produced. Its empty weight of 10,000 pounds exceeded the gross weight of some twin-engine fighters. Its engine produced more power than entire bomber formations from the previous war. Its weapons delivered more firepower than a squad of infantry, yet it was manufactured by the thousands, piloted by young men barely out of high school, and maintained under combat conditions by mechanics who acquired their skills in mere weeks. The transformation of German opinion from mockery to abject terror transpired in less than 2 years. During that era, the formidable flying milk bottle emerged as the most dreaded warplane in the Luftwaffe's history. Even seasoned combat pilots, who had confronted Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Soviet Yaks without showing fear, spoke of the P-47 Thunderbolts in hushed voices for decades following the conflict. At the National Museum of the United States Air Force, located in Dayton, Ohio, a meticulously refurbished P-47D is displayed alongside other iconic aerial combatants. Its descriptive plaque details its performance characteristics and commendations earned in battle. Yet the true testament to its prowess is conveyed through a modest display case. This case houses expended .50 caliber shell casings and a reel of gun camera footage depicting a Focke-Wulf 190 disintegrating under a hail of gunfire. Beneath this exhibit is an inscription, a poignant statement attributed to an anonymous German aviator, extracted from a declassified interrogation report dated 1945. "Initially, we found them amusing," he recounted, "these bulky, ungainly American planes that lacked maneuverability and climbing ability. Our amusement vanished as we grasped their inherent advantage. They possessed no need for intricate aerial dodges or altitude gains. Their strategy was simple. They directed their formidable armament towards the enemy, and their targets simply ceased to exist. Our laughter faded along with our fallen comrades." The P-47 Thunderbolt commenced its operational service as a subject of mockery, but concluded the war as an instrument of utter destruction. In the interim, 8 synchronized Browning machine guns profoundly altered the doctrines of aerial combat, burying the Luftwaffe beneath an overwhelming barrage of projectiles. German aviators had derided the ponderous American fighter in April of 1943. By May of 1945, there remained no German pilots to voice their derision. The Thunder had indeed spoken, and supremacy in the skies had passed to America.